Sheriff, ask the jury to come in, please. We're back in session. The jurors are all present. Ms. Holt, the jury's with you.
Thank you. Grant and Amanda Hayes acted together on July the 13th of 2011 to kill Laura Ackerson. Because by July of 2011, Grant and Amanda Hayes were desperate. They had moved to Raleigh in May of 2010 to try to get custody of Grant IV and Gentle through the court system. It was only supposed to take 3 months. Amanda Hayes didn't want to move to North Carolina. She didn't want to have anything to do with it. But she had moved to North Carolina under the agreed upon 3 months to try to get custody. What you know is that prior to that Amanda and Grant were living in New York, that they had come down here for a visit, and that little Grant had been taken back to New York. Amanda Hayes testified, would have you believe, that that was something to, that Laura wanted Grant to stay there. But you know that's not true. You know that's not true because you heard from John Sargent, who testified that when Laura came to him, that she had already in March filed a custody action, that her child had been taken and she wanted him back. And that it was after that that there was this ex parte action that was filed in the court by Grant Hayes. And at that point, not only do they have Grant, but they get Gentle. Now, Amanda Hayes testified and told you that when Laura filed that action and it came in the mail to Grant Hayes up in New York, that they consulted with an attorney. And that attorney told them that it was just as bad that they were living together as it was for the allegations that they made about Laura in that ex parte order. And she said that Grant said, we need to get married, and so they did. So in order to get those boys, they got married. If you believe her testimony, in order to get those children, they moved to North Carolina for 3 months. Well, by July of 2011, it had been 14 months. And it wasn't just the time. What had happened during those 14 months? Well, they had run through every bit of the money. There was no money left. You've heard testimony about, from Amanda Hayes, about how much money she had before all this happened, how she gave Grant Hayes $50,000, how she had paid lawyers' fees somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000, how she had paid for the psychological evaluation. They had paid $10,000 and there was $5,000 more due, but they didn't have it. And so they had to go back to court, and it was split at that point. $2,500 just on the psychological evaluation. But that wasn't just while they were desperate. They had credit card debts. They had gone through all the savings. They had pawned jewelry. Both Amanda and Grant had pawned jewelry. But what had happened at this point was that they had finally, after many, many months, gotten that psychological evaluation back. And what did it say? It said, among other things, that Dr. Calloway was recommending a 2-2-3 split. And you did hear from Amanda. That was ridiculous. What did that mean? That meant that not only were they not going to be free of Laura, not only were they not going to get custody and be able to move away and pursue their dreams and get out of North Carolina and travel the world, but that they were going to be stuck in Kinston or in Raleigh and having to make these trips. It was ridiculous. Amanda said, Grant threw it and said, it's not worth the paper that it's written on. Dr. Calloway had reported that Grant said, I want my kids to be citizens of the world and not just the U.S. And Amanda reports that they want to move to Nashville, Tennessee because Grant is a songwriter. He has 700 to 800 songs. What does Dr. Calloway go on to say? Oh, and then Amanda says, as a family, it's important for us to travel with him. It wouldn't be fair to the boys or me. It would be fair to the boys if me and the baby get to travel with him and they don't. With these kind of expressed wishes by Grant and Amanda to move away, it is obvious that they do not want Laura included in their children's lives. And she goes on to say that in effect, they want to erase her. Amanda Hayes, through counsel and through her testimony, has sought to portray herself, I believe, as the peacemaker between she and Laura. She's also attempted to distance herself from this custody battle. The same woman that says, I got married for the custody battle. I moved to North Carolina for the custody battle. I spent tens of thousands of dollars in this custody battle, but I wasn't involved. The one who refers to the boys and alternately my boys, she would say, hey, I just told Grant, go ahead and give Laura the kids. What does your reason and common sense tell you about that? What does Laura tell you about the relationship between she and Amanda? August the 23rd of 2010. Amanda called me today. She called me psycho crazy because I didn't have anything better to do with my time than to research crap on the internet. When she was concerned about Gentle and his tears and fretfulness, September of 2010. I'm still wondering what's going on with Gentle, says Laura. I am afraid to even approach the subject with Grant and Amanda. They act as though I don't exist. And you heard about the conflict, about a time when Grant and Amanda were in the Kinston area And they wanted Laura to drop off the boys in Kinston or let them come back to Kinston and not drive all the way to Wilson. And that there was a conflict about that. And Laura was struggling with, do I follow the court order? Or do I accommodate them and take the children there? And what she ends up saying is, another reason I had to go to Wilson is that there are two of Grant the Third and only one of me. If I had stayed in Kinston, he easily could have sent Amanda to Wilson to get her sheets received and then say that I never showed. Either way, I lose. When I got to Wilson, only Amanda and Shay pulled up. No Grant the Third, of course. So she's angry with me visibly. Shay is angry with me visibly, and Kurt. So I lose until we get to court, I hope. So in July of 2011, things were not good. Grant and Amanda Hayes were desperate. It wasn't just about the custody battle between Laura and Grant. It was about their whole way of life. It was about Amanda's and Grant's desire to leave, to take those boys, to have them finally together without Laura. So it was about their desire to erase her. But there was a problem. Laura wasn't going to give up. She had been working a long time and made those boys her priority. Mr. Gaskin said in his closing argument to you that Laura had decided she didn't like the custody arrangement that she had agreed upon. Well, what did John Sargent tell you? He told you that it was always a temporary agreement, that they were always working towards this day in court. And you know, as recent as the night before her murder, Laura was trying to line up people to come testify. She emailed Heidi Shoemaker, girl, do you have it on your calendar? Are you going to be there on the 15th? She wasn't stepping out of the way. And so what were Grant and Amanda's options? They're out of money. They're not going to get to take the children and leave. And so at this point, what they say and what they're talking about is moving to Kinston, in with his parents, and running the daycare center. Which might have been fine for some people. That might have been a good resolution. But you know it wasn't for Grant and Amanda. You know Grant and Amanda had high hopes. You know that their dreams didn't involve Kinston, North Carolina. You know that their dreams involved musical careers and acting and traveling the world. And so when it came to July of 2011 and they were being evicted from their apartment, they were up against a wall. And so on July the 12th, Grant sends an email to Laura and says, how about we try that midweek thing? Do you want to try that midweek thing again? And there's a series back and forth which was presented to you. And there's 9 emails just trying to set up this midweek visitation. And it really doesn't make sense. Laura had had the boys the weekend before. Laura was getting ready to have the boys that weekend. The time before, back in June, it had been a disaster. It was a scene. There was screaming. There was crying when the boys were parted from their mother. Laura called Siobhan hysterical, upset. And so you know that on this night at 9:35, when Grant Hayes contacts Laura and says, you want to try the midweek thing again, that what she says is, tell me what time. Let's not have this emotional problem. What time? And Grant sends her an article about quick and dry. And she says, just tell me what time I can see my children. And so the next day, when she comes to Raleigh to see those children, Grant and Amanda decide he's not taking those children to Laura. She's running late, and he's not going to do it. And so Amanda tells Laura, come to the apartment. From her phone, she tells Laura, you know that because that's what she told Patricia Barakat. And it's her phone. Come to the apartment. When Laura gets there, at 4:59 is that phone call. And that's the last time that phone, a call is placed or a call is answered. And when she goes into that apartment, what the defense would have you believe, what Amanda Hayes would have you believe, is that she was in that apartment and that her children were kept from her. And Mr. Zellinger has talked about the defense needing to stretch that time. Need not for her to get there at 5:30. Because if she gets there at 5:30, it's 4 hours before Amanda Hayes is seen outside that apartment. So they want to stretch it. So Mr. Gaskins tells you that she stopped at the food court at Crabtree and got something to eat. Everything you know about Laura through this trial is she was going to see those children. She was given the opportunity. She was going to see them. She was not going to stop and eat. She had been at restaurants all day calling on people. She didn't stop at Crabtree Valley Mall. That was just to give you some reason to say, maybe she wasn't in that apartment so long. But that's not what the evidence shows, and that's not what your reason and common sense tells you. It tells you that she went to that apartment. And what happened in that apartment, we will never know for sure. We will never know for sure because Laura isn't here to tell us. We will never know for sure because Grant Hayes has been convicted of first-degree murder. I would submit to you we will never know for sure because Amanda Hayes has not been truthful in telling you about those events. What we do know is that while she's in that apartment, before she is murdered, that she signs an agreement that she never, ever would have signed. Laura had gone over the last 14 months, started a business, gotten a place to live, was gearing everything towards getting those boys back. She never, ever would have agreed to take $25,000 for those children. Her lawyer told you that. Heidi Shoemaker told her that. Siobhan Mathis told you that. Everything was geared towards getting those children back. And then to say that on that agreement it is, and I can see them whenever I want at the discretion of their father. It took 9 emails to set up a midweek visit back and forth. So now suddenly Laura would agree to let Grant Hayes decide when she could see those children. Laura Ackerson did not voluntarily sign that agreement or write that in there. Write the thing about whenever their father, I get to see them whenever their father says. You know that. What else do you know? Well, while Laura Ackerson isn't here to tell you, her body tells you some things. Her remains that are found 11 days later in a creek in Texas, when they're examined by the professionals, they tell you some things. they tell you that there's a stab wound to C4. Mr. Gaskins explains that to you by saying her neck must have been cut so the blood could be drained out. That's not what Dr. Ross said. She said there was a stab wound to her neck. We know that from Dr. Radish that she observed the injuries to the neck muscles and the crushing of the cartilage. We know that the damage to her head was like what you would get with a concussion. It was not fatal. We know that she was either strangled or stabbed or some combination of those two. We know that she was murdered in that apartment. You have seen videos from various locations, but one of the first videos that you see is Amanda Hayes in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru. I'm sorry, not the drive-thru, at the Chick-fil-A restaurant, which is about 10 minutes from their home. At 9:42, more than 4 hours from the time that Laura got there. Well, you know it from the video, but you also know because she saved that receipt. She had the Chick-fil-A receipt on her person at the time that she is searched on July the 22nd. She still has that receipt. She didn't have a receipt from Wendy's. She didn't have a receipt from going and buying slushies for the boys. But she has the Chick-fil-A receipt, and they have the video. And in the video, you see her come inside the Chick-fil-A with those kids. She doesn't get the food and leave. She hangs around. And importantly, she buys food to take back to Grant. She buys 2 adult meals, 2 kids meals, 2 adult drinks, 2 kids drink to take back to Grant. She tells you, and her lawyer argues to you, that that's because, let me see if I can get this straight, that that's because she believed that Grant must have gone to the hospital with Laura when EMS is called and that he would be hungry when he got back. You have 1 car. She's got to explain why she's buying that food, and that's her explanation. She has told you that when she was in the apartment, that when Grant comes and says, Laura's been hurt, I need to call an ambulance, that the response is, well, keep the kids back here so they don't speak. She doesn't go and check on Laura. That Grant is at that point going to get her a diaper bag so that they don't go out. No, her response and what she would tell you is that Grant said, I'm going to call EMS. I don't want the kids to see. Keep them in this room. I'm going to help Laura into the bathroom. And we know from what she said that it's the bathroom that has been closed off now conveniently since the night before. The main bathroom, the one that the kids use, all the boys use, has suddenly been closed off. But that's the bathroom that injured Laura is being taken into, according to Amanda. Well, that's because it needs to work later as to why she doesn't go into that bathroom. So she leaves. She's at the Chick-fil-A. You've had a chance to observe her in the Chick-fil-A. You've had a chance to observe her demeanor. She told Patricia Bearcat that Amanda told Patricia Bearcat that Laura was dead. That she knew Laura was dead, and then when she saw her, she didn't feel anything. And so what she does is take the kids and leave and go to Chick-fil-A to get them out of the apartment. She comes back that night. Her testimony is at this point that Grant leaves, that he tells her, first of all, oh, Laura wasn't hurt after all. She got in the car and drove home. That she wasn't hurt after all. That she just decided to leave and go back to Kinston. And then she says he leaves, and now the kids can't go into that bathroom still because it's still messed up. So they go into her bathroom. She puts them to bed. Well, what do you know? You know the next morning that Amanda is on the phone calling Shay. Get over here quick. Or quickly, get over here. She's insistent. Matt Goodad, who's married to Shay, remembers that about it. Shay's not happy. Why do I have to come right this minute? I've just woken up. But no, Amanda is adamant. Come now. And so Shay comes over and picks up the kids to take them out. And she says Grant's there, and Grant's in the bathroom when she gets there that morning. And she's gone, and while she's gone, she talks to her mother on the phone. And her mother says, we need 2 more hours. We need more time. And when she gets back to the apartment, she says, we need your vacuum cleaner. The vacuum cleaner has broken. So at rush hour traffic, Shay gets in the car and drives all the way across town and brings her a vacuum cleaner. And oh, by the way, when you come back, can you stop and get us food? Because during that time, Grant and Amanda had been in that apartment, supposedly packing up. You've seen pictures of that apartment. There's no boxes packed. So Shay gets back and says, send Grant down to help me. And Grant's there and helps her carry the vacuum and the food back up to the apartment. And what you also know is that day, Amanda goes shopping. She goes shopping at the Target that's located across the street from where the apartment is. And you've seen that video. And she said, I was just going to buy snacks. That I was going to buy some food. And oh, and Grant called me and said, pick up some bleach. Well, you know that's not true. There's no phone call from Grant to Amanda during that time. Well, you've already heard, and there was a big deal, you know, when Shay comes to help with the sale of the furniture, she smells the bleach, and that's unusual because she knows her mother doesn't use bleach. But on this occasion, she buys bleach. She buys some food items, but that's not all she buys. She buys a mega lint roller. She tells you, I just thought it was neat. Thought it was something I would try out. She buys an eraser, like a Mr. Clean eraser type thing. I think it's the Target brand, but an eraser. And what does she tell you? She tells you that that's what she used all the time to clean those boys' bathroom. She would use it to clean the soap ring, and she just used that. That's what she used it for. All the time was to clean the boys' bathroom. Well, she's already told you Grant cleaned the boys' bathroom. But now she's got to have a reason to have bought the Magic Clean eraser, and so it was to clean the bathroom. Electrical tape. She bought electrical tape. What's her explanation for that? Well, I had some art. I use it in my artwork. And so I saw it, and so I picked that up. Gloves. 4 pairs of gloves. Scott bathroom tissue. She goes back to the apartment, and that's on Thursday. Now, during the course of this case, you've heard Mr. Gaskins talking about Grant and him being gone and all these shopping trips where Grant's alone. What does that mean if Grant's alone when he's shopping? It means that Amanda Hayes and all the kids are back in the apartment with Laura's body. That's what it means. And she would say, no, I didn't know Laura was dead. I didn't know Laura was in that bathroom. She would have you believe that for 4 days that hall bath, which is the main bath, is out of use and shut off. And that she didn't know that Laura's body was in there. What does your reason and common sense tell you about that? And then Friday, suddenly, it's decided we're going to go to Texas. Now, Amanda says to you from this witness stand that that was Grant's idea. Grant's never been to Texas. This is her family. He's never met any of her family. And if Amanda were to be believed, Grant on his own has come up with, this is a good time for us to go to Texas. So Grant packs up the coolers with Laura's remains and puts them in a U-Haul and takes them to Texas with the idea of disposing of them with people he has never met. He doesn't know what they're going to do. Does that make sense that Grant is the one that says, let's go to Texas? What does your reason and common sense tell you about that? Let's talk about this piece of furniture, this hutch. Amanda Hayes tells you and goes through in detail about this hutch. And this hutch was the last valuable asset that she had. The jewelry's gone, all the investments are gone, they're being evicted. This is the last asset that they have. And so suddenly now it's Grant's idea to take this asset to Texas and give it to her sister. They're in financial straits, so they're going to rent a U-Haul for hundreds of dollars and take a piece of furniture all the way across the country so that it could be safe. Well, what do they do with it when they get to Texas? They take it out, put it in the yard, it's moved to the front porch, sitting outside. So it goes from the storage unit in North Carolina, in Raleigh, to Texas so that it could be safe. It's a cover. It's something to cover while they had to have a U-Haul. Amanda tells you that it wasn't until she got to Texas, and it wasn't even that first day, but it was that night. They get there on a Monday morning, 5:30 in the morning. It wasn't until that night that she finds out, one, that Laura is dead, and two, that they have brought her remains to Texas. That Grant Hayes has brought her remains to Texas. And what's her response? That she freaks out for a minute, that Grant Hayes whacks her with a machete, and that when her nephew comes home from work, she starts talking with him about what he does for a living. She starts talking to him about work. Did you ask him if pigs eat human remains? Yes. Did you ask him about the alligators and whether alligators ate human remains or whether they were in the creek across the street? Yes. Well, she didn't remember exactly. She remembered they talked about alligators, but not exactly the details about the alligators. So, she has, according to her testimony, just found out that Laura's been murdered, that they've brought her to Texas, and after freaking out for just a bit, she's suddenly asking these questions about how to get rid of human remains. Do pigs eat human remains? Do alligators eat human remains? Where are the alligators? Are they right here at the creek? Are they further down? What does your reason and common sense tell you about that? She described it as, I was just trying to act normal. It was an informational gathering session. Not to be confused with the brainstorming session that occurs the next day. This was, I was trying to gather information. So the next morning, after gathering this information, she approaches her sister in the kitchen. And she tells her sister, Laura's dead, and I did it. Do you remember her sister said, do you need a lawyer? No. They were in the kitchen by themselves. Do you want to call the police? Do you need a lawyer? Now let's go out and discuss it. And so they go outside and Grant's over there. Can Grant come over? And they have a discussion, and it's a brainstorming session about how to get rid of the remains. And you remember Mr. Gaskins would say, and then Grant asked this, and then Grant asked that, and Karen Berry said, they asked. They asked if there was a field with a big hole in it. They asked. Grant did ask about the well, and then all of them start walking over towards the septic tank. And it's decided at some point that they're going to try the acid route. And so Amanda leaves with Grant and leaves the children there with Karen and goes to the Home Depot. They go and she goes and withdraws money first, and then she goes over to the Home Depot at 10:30 on a Tuesday. And she says, I'm out in the car. Now there's a problem with it because we know that there's a text sent from Amanda to Karen, don't forget Lily's inside. Because she had left them and the boys were playing outside. Don't forget Lily's inside. So to explain that, Grant has to come out of the Home Depot and give her the phone that she doesn't have access to long enough for her to send that text, and then he goes back in. And you've seen the video. You know he's in there for 30 minutes talking to Mr. Boyer about the smell and the stench and a hog pen and how to get rid of the smell. During that time, Amanda is sitting out in the parking lot. Grant's inside. It's crowded. There are people around. I asked her that. Yeah, there are people around. She didn't ask for help. She doesn't go to anybody. She sits there and waits. And when he comes out, they go back to the house. And it's later that night, after apparently the acid didn't work, that they go out in the boat. The boat situation, you know that Amanda knows about that creek, has been there before, and she's asked about the boat. And so they go out in the boat that night, despite the fact that Candace, her niece, who she hasn't seen for years, basically comes over to visit. But Amanda doesn't stay there and visit. She's outside. She's going out in the boat. She visits for a little while, but she's going out in the boat. She asks Karen for a long sleeve shirt. She asks her for sweatpants. And she's going out in the boat. Candace did say at one point she came inside. She had been outside, and she came inside to get some water and said, "Are you going to be here?" And she hugged her goodbye. Amanda says, I was out being the lookout. I don't know if she said the lookout, but she said I was looking down the road and making sure nobody was coming. It's just getting dark. She would have you believe that Grant is transporting Laura's remains across the street and she's keeping a lookout. Because she doesn't want the coolers being over there. Do you remember when I asked her about it, she said, I was in the boat and I didn't see anything. I didn't know what he was doing. Was initially the implication that she gave you. I was facing the other way. I don't know what was going on. But then when Mr. Gaskins came back and asked her about, you knew what he was doing. Well, yeah, I knew what he was doing, but I was trying to do the minimum that I could. Well, then I came back. What was he doing? Well, I already said what he was doing. No, you didn't. What was he doing? Oh, yeah. I'm supposed to admit to getting rid of the body parts. I'm just supposed to say that it was under duress. That's my line there. So, yes, I knew that he was getting rid of her body parts, but I didn't do any of that. And so when they come back so that Karen can go get her son, they go inside, and then sometime later they borrow the truck. They ask for directions to the apartment complex so that they can get rid of their clothes. Amanda drives them to the apartment complex. They look around, and she says, there wasn't anything on my clothes. I just did it because he told me to. Well, she didn't only give them her shirt, her pants, she gave them her shoes. They threw it all away in the dumpster at the apartment complex that night. And what you know is later, they're back at the residence, they're taking movies and pictures with the kids after having dumped Laura's body in the creek. What do you know about the next day? Well, the next day, you know that she goes by herself to the ATM. And on the way back, she's got to get rid of the acid. And so, by some bad luck, she happens to pick the spot to dump the acid where there's a camera set up. She happens to pull around, back the truck so you can see the license plate, put it in park, get out, and dump 4 boxes, each with gallon jugs of acid. And she doesn't just throw them on the side of the road, she goes and hides them under the tree. She's under duress? Where's the duress? There isn't any. Because they're in it together. From the beginning, they're in it together. And you know that they leave Texas, they head back to North Carolina, and they stop at a hotel in Kinston, or near Kinston. She's not familiar with North Carolina, although she's lived here now all this time. And she was just trying to act normal. And so they take these photographs, and you've seen it. Mr. Gaskins argues that she's haggard, that she's not happy. I'll tell you what this is. This is a celebration. This family is going to be together, and Laura has been, finally, in their view, erased. They've taken her halfway across the country. They've chopped her up, they've poured acid on her, and then they fed her to the alligators in the creek. She thinks they're home free. This is in the face of someone that is frightened of this man. And you know that when they get to Kinston, when the officers with the Raleigh Police Department show up on that Friday to Grant's parents' house, that they're there together and that they have a search warrant, being the officers, to execute on Grant and Amanda's person. And they find the camera that has these photos. They find the receipt from the Chick-fil-A. They find a receipt for some coolers that have been purchased in Amanda's purse. But what may be most interesting and important is Amanda's demeanor. They deal with Amanda. They deal with Grant. And her demeanor is not someone who is afraid or frightened of Grant Hayes. I think Detective Falk described him as looking like newlyweds. She's rubbing his shoulder. They're all over each other. Well, is that for show? How about when the police pick them up at Patsy Hayes' house and transport them downtown? They're not together. Why is that important? That's important because Amanda Hayes is riding with a police officer in a car without Grant Hayes. Where's Grant Hayes? Grant Hayes is with other police officers riding down to the police station. Why is that important? If this had happened as she told you it had happened, don't you know that she would have told the police officers? She says she was scared, she was afraid. How much safer does it get? He's in a police car. She's in a police car with officers. She doesn't say a word about that. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Gaskins said that the state panicked and put Patricia Bearcat on the stand. Well, Patricia Bearcat, the state didn't panic. Patricia Bearcat was somebody that had been housed with Amanda in May and July of 2012, or May through July 2012, so a year after this happened, she was housed with her. Patricia Bearcat, Mr. Gaskins tried to make something of, you got a deal. She said, no, this didn't even come up in my sentencing. She was a friend of Amanda's. She said there are all kinds of people in jail. This was somebody that I became friends with. And she talked with her about what had happened. And Amanda shared with Patricia Bearcat some information. And what you learn from Patricia Bearcat is, unlike what Amanda told you when she was sitting on that stand, is that she hated Laura. They both hated Laura. You also learn that a year later, a year after they've been arrested, Amanda doesn't say, I am afraid of Grant. No. Patricia Bearcat said she loved him. You could tell. She would look at the photos. Never once in all their conversations did she ever say that she was afraid of Grant. Amanda tells her that she knew that Laura was dead in the apartment that night. She doesn't tell you that I ran to the back room when they were struggling, and then I never saw Laura again like she told you. She tells her two versions. The first is that there was this attempt by Laura to hold Lily, and that she called and screamed out she's going to kidnap her, and that Grant came, and that there was a struggle, and that Grant is over her body and says she's dead. The second version is when she adds this whole thing about the tripping and headbutting. Suddenly she knows what's happening behind her, but that Laura must have tripped and headbutt her. But again, she knows that she is dead. What else do we learn from Patricia Bearcat? We learned that she said, if it was an accident, they can't convict me of murder. And she smiled. We learned that she said, Amanda told Patricia, they will never know the cause of death. And she smiled. And Mr. Gaskin says the only thing that you can believe from Patricia Bearcat is it was an accident. And we know that that was Amanda's plan way back then. When she says, if it was an accident, they can't convict me of murder. It wasn't an accident. Amanda Hayes, a year later in jail, is trying out this story on Patricia Bearcat. She looks to her and says, do you hear me? It's an accident. Do you understand what I'm saying? She's trying hard to sell it. But what's Patricia Bearcat's response? If it was an accident, why didn't you call 911? If it was an accident, why did you have to chop her up in pieces and take her to Texas? So Amanda has to revise the story because she's rehearsed those lines and tried it out on Patricia Bearcat, and they're questions that she can't answer. If indeed it was an accident, why wasn't 911 called? If indeed it was an accident, why did you chop her up and take her across the country? So now the story has to evolve to what you heard, which is, I didn't know that she was dead. I didn't know it in Raleigh. I didn't know it traveling all the way across the country. And I didn't know it in Texas until that Monday night. Amanda Hayes told Patricia Bearcat a year later, when Patricia said, well, was she in the car with you? And Amanda says, no, she wasn't in the car with us. She was in the trailer behind us. But that's not what she told you. Because when she came here, that story had to evolve. Had to evolve to say, I didn't know she was dead. Despite the fact that that goes against every bit of reason and common sense that there is. We got some insight, or you got some insight into Amanda from Patricia Bearcat, her friend. What was her demeanor like when she was talking to you? Well, it could change depending on who she was talking to. When you were questioning her and you started pressing her and she snapped back and suddenly that little sing-song, innocent-sounding voice was gone, that's how it was when we talked. But when she was talking to the guards, the COs, when she was trying to get something, when she was trying to manipulate and get special favors, that's when we heard the sing-song voice. That's when we heard that voice. Why did Patricia Barakat come forward? She told you because it was wrong. It was wrong. It was morally wrong what she did. Patricia said, I answered for what I did. But this was wrong. I had to come forward. This is what she had to come forward, even with a friend, based on what Amanda told her. Patsy Hayes came forward and told you about the deposit that she made on the 14th. She told you about the rental properties and that there were none that were vacant during that time. And she told you about the love letters. Now, the defense wants you to believe that that's because Amanda, let me see if I can get this right. Amanda was trying to curry favor so that she could get photographs with Patsy Hayes. And Patsy heard over the media that Amanda was saying bad things about Grant. In what Patsy testified was that she knew that Amanda said, I was afraid of him. I was under duress. And she knew it wasn't true. She knew that Amanda Hayes had been writing love letters. She didn't write, oh, I think the world of your son, therefore keep sending me pictures of these children. She wrote, read him this letter. I love you always. I think of you always. I think of you every day, and I can't wait till we're back together as a family. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in this case, the defense has, through their evidence, begun by telling you or implying that Grant Hayes went to Kinston. They told you in the opening argument, we'll be able to tell you with precision where he killed Laura, where he dismembered Laura. And apparently based on nothing more than a deposit in Kinston and some purchases at gas stations, which, because they're gas stations, just sell gas. And based on their fact that there was rental property there, therefore, it must have happened in Kinston, because they need it to happen in Kinston. They don't need it to happen in this small 3-bedroom apartment with 2 baths where for 5 days Amanda's there. They need some unidentified friend to be helping Grant to do this, because otherwise there's just Amanda. Patricia Barakat said, Amanda said, we had to cut her up because how else were we going to get her out of that apartment? You know where this happened. You know that it was right there on Bella Park Trail. You know that however this horrendous cutting up and the cleaning up that went on in that apartment, you know that Amanda was part of that because your reason and common sense compel you. The part about this case is that your mind wants to believe that nobody is capable of doing these things to another human being. No matter how selfish somebody is, you want to believe that they would not hate someone and care so much about their own personal liberty that they would kill someone and dismember them. And so that fights against your reason and common sense. It fights against who we are as people and what we want to believe about our humanity. And so you don't want to believe this. Grant Hayes is a horrible person that did a horrible thing. But he didn't act alone. Amanda Hayes and Grant Hayes decided that they were going to kill Laura and erase her. That she was going to stop being the barrier and the anchor that kept them here and kept them from going forward. It was selfish, it's horrible, and Mr. Zellinger's right, there's not enough adjectives for it. But what you have experienced through the course of this trial and through Amanda Hayes is a fine acting job. Amanda Hayes has come before you and tried to sell you on a role. She's tried to play a role in which she didn't know what was going on, in which she was controlled and manipulated by another person. And your reason and common sense says that's not what the evidence shows. She was not afraid. She was not afraid then of Grant Hayes. She was not afraid a year later of Grant Hayes. She has given the performance of her life. You had an opportunity to observe her demeanor, how she answered the questions. And do you remember that when Mr. Gaskins asked her that one question, that it started spilling out? Started spilling out. She didn't even wait for the next question. It went on for 15 minutes. And then this happened, and I didn't know that. Oh, and I forgot about that acid situation. And then we have to go back and pick that up. She's been planning this for over 2 years. She's had the police reports. She has come together and constructed something that she thinks answers all the questions. And she's come up here, she's concerned about her wardrobe. She's writing Patsy Hayes, asking for a baby pink blouse. She's concerned about how she comes across on her wardrobe. She's used a voice to try to manipulate you that is not her regular voice, but the one she uses when she wants to get something. Don't fall for it. Tell her that there will be justice for Laura Ackerson today. That it's not going to stop with Grant Hayes being held responsible for his actions. Tell Amanda Hayes that she is going to answer for her part in the murder of Laura Ackerson. Tell her, as you told all of us in jury selection, that the law applies to her just as it does to Grant Hayes. That the fact that she's a woman that the fact that part of us never wants to believe any person would do this, especially not a woman, is not going to get her out of this. That you're going to hold her responsible for her actions. That you are not buying this act that she put on. Tell Amanda Hayes, by your verdict, that she is guilty of first-degree, premeditated murder. Thank you.
All right, Bill.